Proverbs chapter 15 and 16. Some things I think are very interesting about different verses here. In verse 2, it says, "The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright." See, wisdom will use knowledge the right way. Now, somebody can have a lot of knowledge, but if they don't have wisdom, they can't use it the right way. And so wisdom is more important than knowledge, because if you don't have wisdom, you don't know what to do with the knowledge. Now, Socrates was a Greek philosopher before the time of Christ, but he lived after the time of King Solomon. And Socrates said this. He says, wisdom is the most important thing. He says wisdom is even more important than doing right, because if you don't know wisdom, you don't know what is right. You know, and I think I think there's a lot of sense to that. But wisdom will show you the right way to use knowledge. In verse 2, "The tongue of the wise uses knowledge aright." Now, something else I think is very interesting in this chapter. In verse 19, it says, "The way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns." Now, slothful means lazy. And now, where I grew up in the prairies of Colorado, the house I grew up, I could walk 2 blocks and be at the end of town and cross a barbed wire fence, and then there was miles of prairies. Now, in these miles of prairies, if you decide to walk a certain way every day, and you'd walk that way, and pretty soon there'd be nothing growing there. You would kill all the vegetation where you're walking. And then it gets easier to walk. You know, the path gets more and more clean. But see, a lazy person doesn't walk enough to keep the vegetation out of his path. And so his path is full of thorns. The way of the slothful man, the path of the slothful man, the path of a lazy man is as a hedge of thorns. Now, I think everyone here ought to really consider this. Now, my opinion is that the hardest habit to overcome is laziness. And someone can come here, and if you learn to be lazy, then when you go find some job, you'll be too lazy to do it. Now, we've had people here in the past, and they have this attitude, well, I'll wait till I get a job and they pay me well, then you'll see what a good worker I am. Surprise, surprise, surprise. You'll be addicted to being lazy, and when you get that job, you'll be too lazy to do it. And listen, even if you don't get paid, you ought to find something to keep you busy. Because you can become a lazy person, and then once you're lazy, it'll be very, very difficult to start to work. It'll be like walking through a hedge of thorns. Okay, now, something else in this chapter. There are several things in this chapter I'd like to talk about. In verse 21, "Folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom." Now, listen. We should not have fun with sin. We should not make jokes about sin. You know, sometimes we'll make jokes about sin. Now, homosexuality is a terrible sin. We should never make jokes about it. If we had the attitude that God has for it, we wouldn't make jokes about it, and if somebody else makes jokes about it, we wouldn't laugh about it. Sin should not be something for us to enjoy. Now, also, in verse 31, it says, "The ear that heareth the reproof of life shall abide among the wise." Now, if you be able to abide among the wise, that means stay with the wise, that means you become wise. Now, this verse here tells one of the ways to get wisdom. The ear that heareth the reproof of life shall abide among the wise. Now, the reproof. Okay, when we do something wrong, we get a reproof. Hey, that's wrong. If we listen to that, then you know what? We will get wisdom. The ear that heareth the reproof of life. Now, sometimes we can see somebody else go the wrong way, and they get into trouble. And see somebody else going the wrong way. They say, hey, don't do that, and they get into trouble. Now, even though it didn't happen to us, if we pay attention to that, it says, wow, look what happened to him. I don't want that to happen to me. See, we are listening to the reproof of life. And if we do, we'll dwell among the wise. And one of the ways that God has for us to get wisdom is to pay attention to the reproof of life. And now, a reproof is not necessarily the words of somebody saying, hey, you're wrong. The reproof is sometimes we do wrong and we get into trouble and we get hurt. I mean, he said, wow. I mean, if I do this, I get into trouble like that. Hey, you pay attention to that. That's a reproof of life. That's a reproof. Hey, you do this and you'll get into trouble. You'll get hurt. If we will pay attention to the reproof of life, we can dwell among the wise. Okay, now, when I say this chapter, the book of Proverbs can be a difficult thing to listen to a whole chapter, because every verse is like a whole different thought. And I say one verse and you think about that, the next thing you know, I'm saying something else. And it's almost like you have to shift gears. Well, there's 33 verses in this chapter, and most of them are completely different thoughts, and it's like we have to keep on shifting gears, and it can be difficult to listen to a whole chapter, but do something difficult. Okay, now when I stand on this side, I'm talking about something good, and when I stand on this side, I'm talking about something bad. It says, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up angry. The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. A fool despiseth his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is wise and is prudent. In the house of the wise is much treasure, but in the revenues of the wicked is trouble. The lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the foolish doeth not so. The way of the wicked, the sacrifice of the wicked is abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. The way of the wicked is abomination to the Lord, but he loveth him that followeth after righteousness. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. Hell and destruction are before the Lord. How much more then the hearts of the children of men? A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. A merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of heart the spirit is broken. The heart of him that hath understanding seeketh knowledge, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Better is a little with a fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. Better is a din of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. A wrathful man stirreth up strife, But he that is slow to wrath appeaseth strife. The way of the slothful man is as the hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain. A wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son despiseth his mother. Folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom, but a man of understanding hath wisdom. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. The way of life is above to the wise, that he may depart from hell beneath. A man hath joy by the answer of his tongue, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is. The Lord will destroy the house of the proud, but he will establish the border of the widow. He that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house, but he that hateth gifts shall live. The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant words. The heart of the righteous studieth to answer, but the mouth of the wicked poureth out evil things. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he heareth the prayer of the righteous. The light of the eyes, rejoice of the heart, and a good report maketh the bones fat. The ear that heareth the reproof of life shall abide among the wise. He that refuseth instruction despiseth his own soul, but he that heareth reproof getteth understanding. The fear of the Lord is instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. Okay, now this next chapter 17, let me point out some things that I think are very interesting in this chapter here. One of the famous verses in this chapter is verse 8. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride goeth before destruction. That means before you can have a destruction, you have to have pride. Now, okay, as I understand life, we cannot get a place in this world that we say, man, I don't have any more pride. And we've got to be careful. Our pride will bring destruction to us. Now, here's something else in this chapter. In verse 20, it says, he that handleth a matter wisely shall find good. No matter what situation you're in, if you can handle that situation in a wise way, you'll find good. Every situation you're in, every situation I'm in, if I can handle it wisely, I'll find good. Now, God knows all about our situations, and God knows the best things to do in our situation. Now, the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Our situations, we've got to figure out, what does God want me to do? And if we decide, in this situation, I'm going to seek and I'm going to do my best to do what God wants me to do in this situation. If we can take that with all sincerity, we will find good. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good. Okay, now, in verse 31, it says, the hoary head is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. Now, okay, I was very fortunate. When I was a child, I was able to know my great-grandparents. And I remember my great-grandpa Clutter. That's my father's mother's father. Now, I was 15 years old when he died. But it says a hoary head, he had a white hair. And now the hair I have is white, but it's not. But, the hoary head is a crown of glory. Hoary means white. Okay? And maybe when you get old, you can have a white head of hair. But listen, Now, when I was a child, I remember my great-grandpa Clutter very much. And it was always fun to be with him. He was a happy old man. Now, my father, he looked at his grandfather. He says, my goal is that when I get old, I want to be a happy old man like him. And you know what? My goal is that when I get old, I want to be a happy old man like Grandpa Clutter. But hey, you go in the way of righteousness. You do what's right. And then when your body begins to show signs of being old, it'll look good. The hoary head is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. There are many other things that's in verse 7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Now, the enemies might not like you, but if you please the Lord, if you do the way that the Lord pleases, your enemy says, man, I can't stand that guy, but I better be nice to him. It'll make it so that your enemies will be afraid to hurt you. There are so many advantages. If we can decide in our heart, I want to do what pleases the Lord. If we can really if we desire, I'm going to do what pleases God. If we can decide that, our enemies will be afraid to hurt us. They might not like us, but they'll be at peace with us. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Just watch me as I try to say this chapter also. It says, the preparation of the heart of man and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord weigheth the spirits. Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. The Lord hath made all things for himself, yea, even the wicked for the day of evil. Everyone that is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished. By mercy and truth, iniquity is purged. And by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenue without right. A man's heart divideth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. A divine sentence is in the lips of the king. His mouth transgresseth not in judgment. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are the work of his hands. It is an abomination to kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him that speaketh right. The wrath of the king is as messengers of death, but a wise man will pacify it. In the light of the king's countenance is life, and his favor is like a cloud of the latter rain. How much better it is to get wisdom than gold, and understanding rather to be chosen than choice silver. The how of the upright is to depart from evil. He that keepeth his way preserveth his soul. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better it is to be an humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He that handleth the matter wisely shall find good. And whoso trusts in the Lord, happy is he. The wise in heart should be called prudent, And the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it. But the instruction of the fools is folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, and addeth learning to his lips. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. He that laboureth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him. An ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his mouth there is a burning fire. A froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. A violent man enticeth his neighbor, and leadeth him into a way that is not good. He shutteth his eyes to devise forward things. Moving his lips, he bringeth evil to pass. The hoary head is a crown of glory, if it be found in the way of righteousness. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that broodeth his spirit than he that taketh a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. And truly, when the Bible says, he that handleth a matter wisely shall find good. You know, we ought to look. Any situation we're in, what situation you're in, it might be a very difficult situation, it might be a very easy situation. But if you handle that situation in a wise way, it'll work out good.